Just going to one matter which pops up every so often, and it's extraordinary the number of people who repeat this, and they say, and you have Indigenous leaders lamenting that once we were treated as no more than part of the flora and fauna of Australia. Is there any justification in saying that the British and the Australian settlers treated the Indigenous people as no more than part of the flora and fauna of this country?
Well, they certainly didn't do it through legislation. It was there was never in any legislature in Australia, either the colony governments or the federal government, any legislation that was the Flora and Fauna Act. So the legislation that they claim to have been managed under never existed in any case, and that myth has been debunked on many occasions, not least by the ABC's fact-check unit, and yet we still hear it. Minister Linda Burney said it when she first went to Parliament, but she hasn't repeated it since then. But more recently, I came across an example where an Aboriginal legal academic at the ANU,
a legal academic.
Yes,
I just find that extraordinary. Yes.
Yes, it's part of it's one of the things that worry me. The repetition of these baseless claims, which can cause people to think I should vote for this because of these sorts of injustices. The other claim that's made, David, is that, and it's been made also by legal academics, is that the Constitution in 1901 totally ignored Aborigines, and that is just false. It said that it excluded Aborigines from Section 5126, and that was because it was the prerogative of the states at that stage to legislate in respect of Aborigines. And Section 127, which was widely interpreted as meaning they couldn't be counted in the census, but that's, from what I understand and what I've read, that was not the intention of Section 127. My belief, just for what it's worth, is that it related to the returning of revenues to the states after the Commonwealth had spent the money that they would get through customs and excise. In fact, interestingly, that the original intention was that customs and excise would pay the expenses of the Commonwealth, and that the money that they didn't spend, which sounds laughable at the moment in these days, would be returned to the states, but they would not have account of the Aboriginal population in apportioning that surplus. And that's my belief where Section 127 came from. But the fact that those two sections specifically excluded Aborigines means that they must necessarily have been included in all the other sections of the Constitution. So it's a nonsense to say they were ignored by the Constitution.
And that section, which was removed in 1967, was also in relation to the allocation of seats in the House. And there was a fear in the part, not only in relation to the finance, there was a fear on the part of the states that didn't have large Aboriginal populations, that South Australia, Western Australia and Queensland, who had nomadic Aboriginal populations, that they would exaggerate the numbers and thereby, for example, get more seats in the House on the basis of this. So that was a purely practical provision, which by 1967 was completely outdated if it did ever serve any purpose. And Menzies was the first version of the 1967 referendum was merely to remove that. Menzies didn't want Canberra to get the power to legislate with respect to Aboriginal people. This was a matter for the states. His argument was, and it's been repeated to me by one person who actually heard him saying it, but it's certainly there in the legislation for the first version of the referendum. His argument was, if Canberra got the power, you would have a massive bureaucracy in Canberra. That would be the result of that. What you can do to help the Aboriginal people is to use Section 96, give conditional grants to the states, whereby the states are obliged to spend that money, for example, on Aboriginal education.